Hey everyone, it's Phil Frost from Main Street ROI, and I also have Mike Roberts from SpyFu. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks, Phil. Glad to be back.
Yeah, great to have you back. Always excellent content from SpyFu. Today, Mike's going to walk through content planning. He's going to give you all his tips and tricks on how he approaches content planning. This is a huge, important topic with digital marketing. Um, and I know I'm excited. I've got my notepad up, ready to take some notes. And with that, Mike, I'm going to let you take it away.
Awesome. I guess we have some housekeeping stuff. We always do the have the questions that we can take and take live. It's always a really engaged audience. So that's going to be here. And Phil, you're gonna ultimately uh, bring those up potentially live as I'm doing them. Are you gonna do that?
Yes, I've got that ready to go here. So if anyone has a question in GoToWebinar, there's like a questions box. Just type your questions right in there. That'll pop up on my screen. And then when it's appropriate, I will interrupt Mike and we'll get that addressed.
Yeah, I'll probably be in the zone, not really paying attention to this little sort of go to meeting or go to webinar sidebar. I always wish that I could just be like reading everyone's comments as I'm doing it, but I never really can. So hopefully you can do that, and also feel free to like interrupt me at any point and just kind of ask questions and engage in any way that you want. Like we've done this before, so you know how to roll. Um,
Yep. And
so
we got one comment from Caribbean saying good morning. So
oh,
looks
cool.
like everyone looks like audio is working, which is always a good test here.
That is always nice. Let me see. Okay, good. Actually, my controls are all now working as well, which is convenient. So again, thanks everyone for coming. I'm Mike Roberts. I'm the founder and CEO of SpyFu. You can reach out to me directly on Twitter at Mr. Spy. But honestly, at SpyFu gets much faster and reliable response since I'm not manning it. So if you're tweeting about this presentation, that's the right one to use. I'm also sort of active on Reddit. I'm Sporktopus. I have no idea where that came from. It just is what it is. And these days, I guess Facebook is kind of becoming the new LinkedIn. So you can reach out to me on Facebook. I don't have it on here, but just search for me. It's not like my name is super common or anything, but SpyFu isn't, so that's nice. So just real quick, SpyFu, if you've never heard of SpyFu before, you can go to SpyFu, type in any website and see all the keywords that they rank on Google. Every keyword they buy and every ad variation that they've ever run. You can see your competitors' best performing content, where they get their backlinks. You can track your keywords and even manage your outreach. The idea is you can learn from your competitors' mistakes without having to suffer through them yourself. And you can take what's been successful for them and build from it. A couple things that kind of make us a little bit unique. At SpyFu, our mission is to level the playing field, to put the power into the hands of small business and entrepreneurs, of agency owners and marketers. We're a bootstrap company from the very beginning. I started the business out of my house with like $3 grand in the bank. I built SpyFu's predecessor to help me spend that money like wisely. And so these are my people, and that's who we're here to help. So we deliberately keep the price of SpyFu, for example, at like 1/10 the cost of everybody else, because quite honestly, we found that if we cut our price in half, we double the number of customers we get. So we make the same amount of money, but at the same time, we're able to put money in other people's pockets. And we think that's awesome. Another thing about SpyFu, just real quickly, is that SpyFu is all you can eat. So you can look at as many websites, download as many keywords as you want. Everybody else kind of puts crippling limits on what you can do. Like you can only view like 100 keywords a day or whatever. We don't do any of that. Everything on SpyFu is unlimited. So not really necessarily trying to sell you SpyFu, whatever. I'm just basically giving you an idea of where we come from and what motivates us. All right, so let's get started. First, what I'm going to talk about is the goals of the content. What are we trying to accomplish with the content in general? Sort of content's like this word that's like can mean like content plural or content singular, like the individual pieces. So what's the difference between the goals of the content in general and each piece? Then I'll talk about what a core keyword is, and the various ways to find them. Then I'll talk about how much content, what kind, and we'll talk about how to define topics, and finally how to create it at scale and to build upon it. What's the sort of iterative approach to this content plan? Okay, so the first step is to literally ask the question, what is the goal of this content? Out loud. Like, what's the purpose of the content marketing we're planning? You have to ask the question out loud, because the thing is, pretty often everybody on the team it doesn't have the same perspective, and it seems like an awkwardly dumb question to ask, right? So nobody says it out loud, but there's some complexity to this. There's more than one right answer. Another way of asking this, if you want to sound smarter, right, is, but really be asking the same thing, is how will we measure the success of this content? Which metrics will we use? Those are kind of like little tricks to not sound dumb, but still say the same thing. So the goal of your content marketing isn't to generate traffic. It's not to create shares. It's not to get links. It's not to retarget. It's not to inform people. I mean, it might be those things, but at best, those are your micro goals. And at worst, those could be vanity metrics. And you have to have this conversation, even if it's just with yourself, to know the difference. Ultimately, your macro goal is to get people to buy or sign up or see ads. Whatever it is, it's about money. Anything else it could be a distraction. So just because the overall goal of your content marketing needs to have to do with money, doesn't mean that every piece of content, every individual piece needs to be like optimized for conversion or whatever. In fact, it shouldn't. And that's why it's really important to ground yourself to that overall goal before you start planning, because it can be, I don't know, confusing or distracting, whatever, right? So, just build great content. That's what everyone says. Sometimes they add the word really to drive that point home. Create really great content, right? Yeah, cool, but no. Great content has to do three things. Number one, get lots of traffic, be super authoritative and thought leaderish, and efficiently convert readers into buyers. And you can try to build every piece of content so it does all those things really well. But I think when you optimize for one of them, you sacrifice the others and vice versa. I mean, you might be able to spend a ton of time building the super perfect Uber content. And there are times when you'll want to do that. Actually, every rule is meant to be broken. And when it's a really good fit, you can do that. But I think it's rare. And in general, building super content doesn't scale, and it can be frustrating. And super time consuming. It's time consuming. It's frustrating because it's time consuming and you didn't necessarily get the results that you were trying to achieve because you basically tried to build this perfect piece of content. So here's what you do. Don't try to make each piece of content do all the things. Make each piece of content do one of those things really well. Put each piece of content into a bucket. Some of it needs to generate traffic. So in that case, your metrics will be visitors and shares. You can leverage that traffic to build retargeting audiences and email lists, but your goal with this content isn't to convert or to get backlinks. You'll definitely want to use that content to feed into your converting and authoritative content, but those aren't its goals. The other bucket is your authoritative thought leadership content. And this may be some of the best stuff you've ever written, but guess what? It's probably not going to get a ton of traffic. That's okay. The goal is to drive links and mentions. You're basically influencing the influencers with this stuff, right? The goal is to improve your overall authority of your site, which will drive up the ranks. It lifts. It's like it's a tide that lifts all ships, right? All of the rest of your content will rank better because your because of your authoritative content and the links that it gets, right? And so finally, and by the way, for those ones, your primary metrics are going to be your backlinks and your mentions. And so finally, the converting content is designed to convert browsers into buyers. I'm not necessarily talking about the product pages or your sort of homepage or something. It's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is these would be like the keywords that are a ways down the funnel, targeting searchers that are ready to buy. It's the type of search that you're targeting with this converting content. So those are the 3 buckets that I recommend you put each piece of content into. But remember, the whole thing, the content as a plural, as a plan, as your content marketing, the overall goal is to create money. As a system of content, it does these things. And as a system, you have effectively authoritative content that gets lots of traffic and that all converts. The system accomplishes all that goal, but each piece of content has its own goal and its own metrics. Okay, so now let's look at some tricks to find your core keywords. When I'm talking about core keywords, what I mean are the relatively broad topics that you want to rank on. I'll go into how broad they should be in a minute. There's a sweet spot that varies a bit on based on like how authoritative your website is, or potentially also how difficult the keywords are. Like it's like this combination of how much authority do you have versus how difficult it is to rank in your market anyway. But right now, I'm just going to talk to you about how you come up with them. I mean, the slide kind of says it, but you don't need to worry about the long tail yet. We're just looking at the top level topics right now. Okay, so the first way you get core keywords is what I call divine edict. They may come from your client. They might say, I want to rank on wicker patio furniture. Okay, boom, that's one of your keywords, right? You might be a business owner or in charge of in-house marketing. And in any case, these are the keywords that you can just kind of write down off the top of your head. You know them because they are, right? So just put those in your spreadsheet. The next place you can look at is for keywords where you already have traction. Which keywords do you rank on already? These are great momentum builders, right? If you already are ranking on a keyword, then that means you already have traction. So sometimes you can just improve that existing content or add some supporting content, and you can like knock out some early wins in sort of in your SEO. And momentum is awesome. Don't underestimate the power of like this sort of getting early wins. If you have clients, obviously that's a huge deal. To walk on water early, and so just sort of applying almost like the next step of like sort of the improvement step. We'd have to fast forward about 70 slides, but it's like improving or augmenting or adding additional. There's a bunch of different strategies they're going to give you. But those can be kind of your earliest wins because once you have traction, you just have every position that you move up, you're going to get 50% more views. So good places to find this stuff: Google Search Console. You can also use SpyFu or one of our competitors. It used to be you could use like Google Analytics or whatever, but obviously you can't do that anymore. There's no real keyword data that comes through. So you're going to look at Google Search Console or SpyFu or whatever. So another great place is to look inside your own PPC campaign, your AdWords account, your Google Ads account, I guess it is now called. Your PPC campaign is awesome because those keywords are keywords you're already paying for. The messaging is testing and they convert for you, at least ideally. And obviously, if you can rank on them, not only could you save money, but more importantly, the organic results get more clicks than the ads, right? Like generally speaking, we talk about like getting, moving up in ranks, but also taking over the entire SERP is a good deal, right? Like if like it's cool to have the #1 position, but you have the #1, #2, #3, #4, #5 positions, And in a way, you can kind of think of like your ads as potentially being a #1 position and your organic being a #2, or vice versa. Anyway, the idea is that you can justify your content marketing, even if it's just to yourself, and maybe steal some budget. So all those other 3 things are looking at opportunities inside your business. They're, kind of already there. But what about stuff that your company hasn't thought of? Like what's working for your competitors that you might not even know about? Obviously, this is kind of an area that I'm fairly familiar with. But let's talk about a couple of competitors, let's talk about competitors in general for a second, and a couple different types of competitors. I have lots of entrepreneur friends, and when I talk to them about when I talk to them about their competitors, especially like the lawyer guys, there's always someone that annoys them, right? It's like that guy's got his name plastered on a billboard, and he's got his own racing team or boat or whatever. He's a huge dick, and what's he doing, and I'm not, right? They always have a competitor that they want to crush. And so that's your first type of competitor. These are the competitors you want to crush. And honestly, that sort of visceral impulse is, is in a way near and dear to my heart. It's probably what drives a lot of SpyFu's initial acquisition. People sign up because they want to crush somebody, and that's cool. Crush that guy. But the truth is that billboard guy may not be doing anything all that impressive. In fact, it's pretty common that if you look at the competitor that you want to crush, they're all right, but the competitors that you really want to look at if you want to step up your game is the ones that you admire. And these are the ones that are doing content marketing or whatever. If you're right now we're talking about content marketing, but you ultimately want to look at your competitors that are doing something really well that you want to learn from. And they're probably not who you would initially think of as your direct competitor, or if you ask your client who's your competitor, these are probably not the ones that they're going to list. If you were to go to SpyFu and type in their website or your website, we generate a list of pretty solid competitors that are like maybe more digital than what often people will think of. Of course, they could, the competitor that you want to crush might also be the one that you admire, and that's all. If so, that's adorable. So I'll just give you an example. Moz and Search Engine Journal and WordStream, these aren't SpyFu's direct competitors. Obviously, Search Engine Journal is like an industry trade publication, and none of these guys directly compete with us. But they all do a really great job at content marketing. I would love to have their blog be my blog, right? I admire their content marketing. I don't want to crush them, So I want to look at them. I want to use them to make me better. I want to learn from them. So what we do is we look at the entire keyword universe for all of these competitors that we admire, and we group those keywords into topics, right? So, and then what we want to do is we want to quantify each of these groups. And to do that, we're basically taking the sum of all their long tail variations. Now, you don't need to worry about the long tail, right? Just look at the whole thing as an overall topic, right? So here I'm looking at this marketing strategy is kind of this overarching topic, and here's all of the long tail keywords: marketing strategies for nonprofit organizations, marketing strategies for small businesses. You take that whole thing, and that represents a topic. And so, just to be clear, when I'm talking about this topic, right, this is what I'm talking about as a core keyword. The same thing. I'm just sort of interchanging these words. But how big should a core keyword be? Normally. And this is a great point for you to jump in on. I'm going to start throwing out some rules of thumb in here, Phil. And so if you disagree, totally tell me. If you agree, or if you just feel like it's a different vector, let me know. I'm basically going to commit to a starting point for everyone. Normally, people don't commit to answers on these things. Usually, when people say how many of this and how much content and what's the size of things, it depends, and it definitely depends but I'm just going to give you a starting point and kind of give you some dials to turn depending on your situation, and that way you at least have a general sense of what you need to do, how you need to be doing your planning. Okay, so I think that a core keyword should support 3 to 10 pieces of content, or maybe like 10,000 words of written content, roughly speaking. And each piece of content should target about 300 to 3,000 searches per month. How do you feel about that, Phil? Does that sound about right?
I think that's definitely a good rule of thumb. Um, when I read that initially, how big should the content be? I thought you meant the words. Are you going to get to that in a minute?
Yeah, I mean, I do.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Okay.
generally, I think the content should be these days about 1,500 words or so is a reasonable starting point.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with that.
So yeah, like 3 to 10 pieces of content, 10,000 words roughly, like right in the middle of all that. So that's it's kind of where I'm at. All right, so I'll just move on. So the all right, so each piece of
Oh, I
content should
guess
be. Oh yeah.
I will chime in with a question here.
Okay.
I don't know if anyone else is thinking of this, but this is something I always struggle with as far as the angle of the content. I'm sure you'll get to that, Mike. But when you say like 300 searches per month or 3,000, um, I guess it goes back to the purpose of the article. Is it to drive sales or
Oh yeah, of
be
course.
authoritative? Um, and yeah, curious to get your take if on the lower end you're really considering that more of let's drive some sales since there's not too much traffic there. Um, I guess, do you have a rule of thumb as far as the searches per month tied to the type of content that you would create?
Well,
Does that make
typically
sense?
the ones that you're going to try to convert on are going to be more those topics are further down the funnel.
Right.
So they're kind of buying keywords or comparison keywords. Um, and so I think that you're like kind of carefully crafting that particular piece of content to convert. And so in a way, like the amount of time that you spend, right, producing, like 500 words of content for that will wind up being about the same as something higher up the funnel, or in, sort of um, content that's designed to drive traffic is requires like less time, less authority, less thought sometimes. It kind of I'm kind of speaking in relatively broad strokes because we just need, like I don't have any specific examples that I'm dealing with yet. Just trying to give you a basic idea of where we're starting.
Okay, that makes sense.
And of course, by the way, eventually it might make sense to combine these topics into like mega pieces of content, and that kind of happens in our next step, editing and optimization. Because these days having like a really like a mega piece of content that is kind of the best choice, a really authoritative piece of content like that increases dwell time, keeps people on the page. Google's looking at these sort of user experience metrics to determine, who's got the best content. So, but you don't need to really think about that part right now. We just want to like figure out how to estimate what we need to do in terms of our execution and planning.
Oh, real quick, because Gail had a question here. Does this mean your goal of your post should be to get between 300 to 3,000 searches per month?
You're looking at keywords where the search volume is 300 to 3,000 searches per month. So that's what you're targeting when you're doing your keyword research. That's what we do up front, right? Like back here, when we're looking at these overall topics, we're looking at kind of what's this search volume number, for the overall topic, for the core keyword.
Okay,
Make
great.
sense?
Gail got it.
Cool.
Yep.
Anyway, so 3 to 10 pieces of content targeting 300 to 3,000 searches per month. So that's a pretty broad range. If you sort of do the multiplication, it's like 900 to 30,000 searches. But kind of the area you're targeting for a core keyword is about 5,000 searches per month, right? So if you're just starting out and you have a low authority site, or if you have a highly competitive niche, you want to go a little bit lower. And if you've built up some authority for your site, and your competition and keyword difficulty is a bit lower, you can target a higher traffic on those core keywords. So that's where your slider is. It's this combination of your existing authority, the competition, and the general difficulty. Further down the funnel where they're buying keywords, usually those are going to be higher competition, and so you're going to want to like have sort of smaller keywords that you're targeting. For given the same amount of effort or like content quality. So how much content do you need? Well, so you know, basically the way this works is that you add up the search volume for all of your core keywords and divide by 1,000. This is and that's roughly the amount of articles that you need. So let's say you have 20 core articles with an average of 5,000 searches per month. So 20 times 5,000 is 100,000 impressions. So 100,000 searches divided by 1,000 is 100 articles. And again, so these days you're going to want to have you want to write your articles to about 1,500 words. It's kind of the general rule of thumb. This is a trend where I think that, say, 4 or 5 years ago, we would have been saying something like 750 words. And 10 years ago, you might have said, well, just throw like 300 words at the thing and see what happens. So the trend is that the content is getting long. Is that something you've seen as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I would echo exactly what you said. And we used to say, minimum 300 way back in the day, then minimum 500, and now it's really skewing to at least a minimum of 1,000. But you mentioned like a mega article. We call them super articles, and we're finding those work the best, where you're really in like the 2,000 to 3,000 word range.
Yep. Yep, definitely. It's all moving towards like these super authoritative pieces of content. And so in terms of breaking this stuff down, I'm talking about 1,500 word articles. But I think that like the first thing I do once I get some traction is I'm going to probably combine, take some content from the other articles and add them into one of the ones that's got some traction. It's kind of one of the first and simplest techniques. We'll get to it in a minute, but here's where I'm starting in terms of topics, and you're gonna do things this way to start with. Okay, so I mean, obviously these are all rules of thumb, but the idea here is to get a handle on the scope and to understand where you're going and what's your return going to be. So this is just kind of the beginning. I'm going to give you the overall process of how to like calculate your ROI on this, and that's where we're going to go. So the process is to measure what you get, find the key successes, and then double down on them, right? So and then just keep going. And really the keep going part, like you put out a piece of content, the keep going part and continuously improving part is, I mean, spoiler alert, that's really where you get your biggest gains. And so what should you expect to get? I think on your first pass, you'll get about 2 to 20 visits per 1,000 impressions per month. And more simply, that means about 5 to 10 visitors per month per piece of content, which seems kind of bleak, right? All that glorious content, 1,500 words. If you wrote this 1,500 word article and you're gonna get like 5 to 10 visitors per month, it's kind of devastating, right? But it'll get better, I promise. But two things, right? That's your average. In reality, out of 100 pieces of content, you're going to get some that are going to get no visit. I guess it gets worse, right? Some of your glorious content is going to get no visitors at all, like nothing, or one, or you promote it and those are your visitors, but like the recurring visits is basically nothing. It's like a complete waste. But that's okay because those zeros, it's like if you ever done a road trip, and you want to keep your average speed to like 60 miles an hour, stopping at the convenience store, those zero mile minutes really screw up your average, right? So those zeros are going to bring you down by a lot. But you also have some super high performers, like your top 5 or 10 pieces of content, your top 10%, let's say, are going to be getting most of the traction and they're generating most of the traffic. And those are the ones you want to double down on. Larry Kim calls those your unicorns, and the zeros he calls your donkeys. Number two, you're only getting started. There's like 20 to 50 times more clicks available once you get a foothold, once you have that traction. You just need to double down, improve that content, add supporting content, and I'll get into that in a minute. But here's a really convenient thing to remember. Every spot that you move up on page 1 gets you 50% more clicks. So if you're in position 7 and getting 100 clicks, you'll get 150 clicks just by moving to position 6. Commit that to memory. It's like really useful to remember. It follows the, you can look at and think about the click-through curve and stuff like that. But the process of moving up one position gets you 50% more clicks on page 1. Pretty much past page 1, it's going to get you 20% more clicks. But and then so that's just kind of like memorize it. You don't need to know anything else, but it helps you to cement that concept of incremental improvement. And each little position, each little movement is actually way more big of a deal than it seems like. So here's where we're at. 20 core keywords targeting 100,000 searches a month needs 100 pieces of content to drive you about 1,000 visitors per month on your first pass. But remember, it's 1,000 visitors every month, like forever. It's an asset. I mean, nothing is forever, but let's assume that a piece of evergreen content has like a lifespan of 5 years, right? So let's calculate the lifetime value of that content. So you've got 5 to 10 visitors per month times 60 months is about 500 visitors per article. Again, on average. Or another way, you've got 1,000 visitors per month for like all of the articles. For 60 months is 60,000 total visitors. And what's the value of a visitor? Well, that really depends. I can't give you a rule of thumb on that one. The best way to figure out it out is to like take the conversion rate of a first-time organic visitor to your blog and multiply that by your customer LTV, which sounds like a mouthful, but hopefully, if you have a business, then you've got a handle on that. If you don't, or if you're working with a customer and they don't know it or whatever, you can figure it out by like what the same traffic would cost via paid search. So what's your average? Basically your average CPC for your profitable campaigns on AdWords, right? So that's kind of a simple way of getting it, or getting a pretty good estimate. I mean, I'd actually discount what your CPC is because you're pushing them to a specific landing page and an organic, and you're targeting a specific keyword over there, and organic you're not. Anyway, so for my company, for the sake of calculating, depending on which one of these calculations that I use, so for $4 is my organic visitor, conversion. When I use this, when I take the conversion rate of my first time organic visitors to my blog, I get $4. And if I take my cost per click, it'll be like $8. So let's go with the $4 one because I think it's more accurate and it's also more conservative. So for us, if we got 60,000 visitors to our blog, it'd be worth $4 per visitor for a total of $240,000. So there we go, $4,000 a month, which seems like not that much, but because it's a recurring evergreen asset, it's worth nearly $250,000, which is kind of awesome, right? But not all the content needs to be evergreen. Some of it could be timely, like, newsy industry trend stuff. Or there's this concept of newsjacking, where you create some content in anticipation of an event that's going to happen in the future. Like we did one for the final season of Game of Thrones, and another one for like the Slack IPO. You could do this stuff for like the start of the NFL fantasy draft. That's like newsjacking. You're just basically creating content in anticipation. I mean, there's a variety of different strategies for newsjacking, but kind of the easiest ones are to play off of like these big sort of pre-existing events. Obviously, I mean, if you're like a financial company, you might look at people's like Netflix's quarterly reports or something, and you build some infographic around whatever, right? Anyway, this stuff isn't evergreen. It's content that pays off all at once, and really, realistically, 500 visitors today is better, and actually, in a way, it should be worth more than 500 visitors over 5 years. But it is a bit harder to predict and plan, and you're sort of constantly chasing that sort of news. You have that newsroom sort of mentality, which is tough. I think it's a little bit harder, a little bit less. I think in a way it's easier, in a way it's harder. I don't know what to, but you don't have to do one or the other, right? You can create a mix. And these sort of timely pieces of content are likely to fit into your traffic bucket, by the way. So keep that in mind. It's likely not converting content, and it's likely not like your authoritative stuff. It's designed to generate traffic. So you gotta figure out how much you can mix in. You really can't probably do all of that type of content. But if you mix 4 pieces of evergreen content with every 1 piece of timely content, rather than needing to wait like a year for the content operation to break even on like cash flow, you'll basically be constantly cash flow neutral. So it's basically always paying for itself. Your content marketing is always paying for itself, which is, if you're a small business, cash flow is good. I mean, I don't care if you're a big business or a small business. I don't know. I like cash flow. Cash flow is nice. I'm not going to go super in depth on the math on there, but just trust that works. You just create a mix, and it sort of, at least in theory, it'll pay for itself. Okay, so 100 articles, 150,000 words, 6 hours per article. If you're writing 8 hours a day, you'll be done in 15 weeks. Hopefully you're super passionate about that topic, and you have an unsatiable appetite for, wow, I did that. I just came up with that on the fly right there. An unsatiable appetite for writing about this one thing. Honestly, no, you don't really need to write it all. You really just need to write the authoritative or maybe the conversion focused stuff. To be honest, you don't necessarily need to write any of it, but the way that I would generally structure this stuff is as a hub, is in a hub and spoke structure, right? Where the core pieces of content that are authoritative, the stuff that you're writing, kind of sits at the middle, and then you have all these support pieces of content that wrap around it. These are kind of the ones that you can outsource. And then you like link all those hubs together, and then you just blow up planets. Now, so now the thing is that you have, if all you have to focus on is these core articles, core. I'm using the word core way too often. That's actually what I used here, core, because core keywords. But anyway, you've got these authoritative pieces of content. And these are the only authoritative and conversion content. Those are the only ones that you have to write. But honestly, you don't, like I said this before, you don't have to write all that core that stuff first. You could certainly wait and prioritize which main pieces of content you personally write based on what comes back as like sort of your top 10% or your unicorn content that you want to double down on, if that makes sense. That's a little bit. I feel like laziness is a virtue. I would personally not write, I would personally not necessarily write all of those main topics before I write, before I see what kind of traction I get, because the other process is a little bit more straightforward. If you feel like you want to write some of that stuff, then do it. And, you know, it is what it is. This is kind of a, you know, it's something you can sort of choose your own destiny. All right, so let's talk about how to create those other 80 articles at scale. And what I'm going to outline for you is a really fast shortcut way of what's called the skyscraper model. Basically, what we're going to do is go from our keywords and figure out a topic and match the search intent, and then produce the articles in an almost automated way. And then, of course, we'll track the results and repeat. So here we go. Here's one of the keywords that I want to rank on. Hypothetically, it's not, you know, I don't really want to rank on this keyword myself, but just one that I found for you for this example. So single mother grants. It's got the right number of searches and a medium keyword difficulty, and so then I'm going to look at the SERP. And you could certainly go look directly at the SERP on Google. I'm using SpyFu because, well, I mean, you know, I've built it and I understand it, but it also shows me the domain strength of each site. And I know that I really want to avoid the super strong domains like Wikipedia and Amazon, or just ones that just have like a really high domain authority for kind of no real reason, or not necessarily no real reason, but no real reason specific to this topic. Generally, I want to get an understanding of what kind of content is ranking. Is it a list of grants? Is it, you know, is it like, are these lists, or are they guides? Is it video content? Are there, you know, product pages in here? Are there government websites, EDUs? What's ranking, right? And once I get a feel for that, I'm going to pick the ones that are ranked the best, that aren't super strong domains, and that match the type of content that Google thinks matches the searcher's intent, right? So when you look at a SERP, you're going to see that there's certain types of content that Google wants to have on the SERP, and that's like what they believe that the intent is. Okay, so so then I'm going to quickly look at what other keywords that content ranks on. You can do that in like SpyFu, or you can do it in, you know, any of our competitors. And then I look at the content itself. How good is it? How long is it? Can it be beaten? In this case, yeah, this is kind of trash. I feel actually kind of bad for like single mothers who have to look at this graph. Like it's this is my eyes are actually I don't want to say my eyes are bleeding, but I feel bad for my eyes and the eyes of any single mother looking at this horrible page. So then I'm going to find another high-ranking piece of content that's the same type of content. You know what I mean? So if there's like two top 10 lists, cool, take those. If there's two guides, take those. You want it to basically be the same general topic and type. You know, so whatever. And so here's one from a different site, and it's pretty similar in that it also sucks. And is also ranking pretty high. So now we're going to write the articles, okay? And to do that, well, you know, there's a bunch of ways to do it. You can use an agency, you can use a writer that you hire or outsource to, or you can use a service. The other two are pretty straightforward, or like kind of like you can figure out how that's going to work. I'm going to show you how to use a service, right? So a content writing service. So here's the general steps. So you translate, you've already figured out the topic. You're going to translate that topic into a spec. You're going to select a writer, you put in like the content type, approve the content, and then you're going to post it. And honestly, this step 4 where it's profit isn't exactly right. It's kind of a simplified thing, because once you get the content back, you're going to have to probably, well, you're certainly going to have to read it and proof it and edit it, and then potentially add links and all that stuff into it. So the post process isn't necessarily nothing. It's definitely not nothing. You're going to wind up doing some things on this, and I'll get into that as we get through this. But I just want to show you what the what the creation to get the content built. What is it? Okay, so the company I'm going to use here is called Writer Access. The founder of the company is a friend of mine, and so I'm pretty biased. I've actually never used another service, but I know their competitors. Text Broker is one of them. I suspect that they're similar and probably pretty good. I think that there's actually a decent number of these, but again, I know the guy. They're based in Boston. They do a pretty good job. So anyway, you go in here, you select the job and the writer. You can actually choose a specific writer. You can like kind of interview them or whatever. Or you can just choose like the writer rating if you just don't really know yet, right? And you can kind of like look and see what they give you and go from there. You're gonna choose the length of the content. I'm gonna set it to 1,500 words. But importantly, I always make sure that whatever I'm building is kind of part of the skyscraper model. The skyscraper model is you find what's ranking and then you beat it, right? So it's like it's called the skyscraper model basically because like it's I think it's a reference to like the height race in for skyscrapers, right? Like who's got the highest skyscraper? You just build one that's bigger, and then somebody else builds one that's bigger than that, and it's kind of a bit of a thing, right? So in this case, I'm going to make sure that my content is significantly like at least 50% bigger than the other content. It's just a starting point, right? Like length doesn't necessarily mean quality, but it's, you know, all things being equal, that's where we're going to start. So then I write a spec. Actually, I literally just copy and paste a spec that I previously used, and then I just swap in the URL. So I just want to read to you the entirety of this spec. It's very URL1, URL2. This is an order based on an article, or this is for an article based around the same topic as the provided URLs. We're looking for a brand new article, but taking the same approach. This article will be published to this site, and here's the target audience. The only things that I ever like swap out are the two URLs that I basically want them to read and produce something that is not that's similar. And on these services, you're going to pay about 7 cents a word or so, 5 to 10 cents a word. So a 1,500 word article is about $100. And that whole process from figuring out what to skyscrape to getting the content writing, like actually running, you know, takes less than 5 to 10 minutes, or takes about 5 to 10 minutes, which is a lot better than the 6 hours to write it, right? You could whip out like 50 of these in a day, hypothetically, but you shouldn't. Oh, my phone's ringing. That's think I'd be in like a
Oh
movie
my God.
theater or whatever. Yeah.
I'm going to jump in and just clarify. I imagine some people are wondering, so does this content need to be published under your name? Do you have any recommendations around that? So because if you're not drafting it yourself, maybe you wouldn't be comfortable publishing it under your own name.
That's a good question. I don't know. I think that oftentimes it's sort of like I think that very frequently people do just post it as their own name because you know, they're using like WordPress or whatever. They're the ones that are pushing it in and they end up putting it out there. I think that, I mean, you actually own the content. It's stuff that you buy. You could certainly give the author credit. It's not incumbent upon you to do that on the, you know, using these platforms, because again, you're basically buying, you know, ghostwritten content. I think that that's totally up to you. Usually, yeah, I don't know what to do. I don't actually engage there. I think that we have content written, and then whoever posts it winds up getting the credit for it. To be honest, I know that's how our process works.
Yeah, I guess a follow-up question would be, you know, when you talk about content, are you just talking about blog posts, in which case there would be an author, or are you also talking about just a page on your site that has, you know, information for single mothers looking for grants?
Yeah, I mean, great question. Obviously, I'm talking about all types of content, and I'm just walking through this sort of article creation process. But yeah, like if you have a list of articles, it's like the attribution may matter may matter less. I mean, what do you guys do with that when you do stuff? Do you all you don't you do it for clients or do you not do it for clients?
We do, and we'll talk to clients about whether they want it in their name or just kind of a general admin
Mm-hmm.
uh, on the blog. But if it's in, we'll build out like a resource center on a
Mm-hmm.
website. So that might be like how to get grants for single moms. It's like a how-to article. It doesn't need to be a blog, so then it doesn't have to have a name on it. So I would just throw that out if anyone's having concerns about putting your name on the content.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. So, like, sometimes you have a blog where there is where there is an author, and so you're like, well, which author do I choose for this piece of content that nobody wrote, that nobody here wrote? And so I guess you could have like you could have a generic. I think we used to have for spy for one version of our blog. We used to have like just a generic SpyFu logo, but that would actually apply to all kinds of things. So we just basically have a user that was like, instead of being like somebody's face, it was just a logo. Um, that's a thing you could do if sort of like your template that you're using has a face associated with everything, because it's like, how do you deal with that situation? Or not even just a face, but like an actual person. It could be by staff. Staff is a way of doing it if you want to
Yep.
not claim attribution. Um, or nothing. Of course, nothing is kind of the best way to do it if you want to, if you, I think that nothing is probably the ideal way of doing it. But practicality is practicality. We work in a world where we are using CMS platforms that have templates, and oftentimes you can't just have like some content have a face and a name and other content have nothing. So you just kind of fill in like these little blank avatars. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's tricky. Anyway, you again, you could bust out a whole bunch of these all at once. I don't think that you should, because when the content does come back, you're gonna need to read it, and there's a pretty good chance you'll need to edit it, and you're definitely gonna need to format it and add some links. Oftentimes, these guys will you can have them create images for you, particularly if the images are like screenshots. You could have them choose some. You could give them like a stock photo thing and have them choose stock photos. That can be part of the content creation process. They'll definitely do that for you, but you're gonna have to load stuff into your CMS. You're gonna need to format it. You're gonna need to create links, especially internal links. They'll create external links for you, but in terms of your internal linking, you're gonna need to do that. So in reality, it's going to take you probably an hour or so. That's what I would estimate per article. And honestly, reading and editing, um, well, I'll speak for myself. I think it kind of sucks. I think it can be kind of mind numbing. I don't know anybody that would disagree with me. Ex I I don't know. I've never met anybody who's like, I really just want to read and edit this stuff, but there's probably somebody that's super into that. But I don't know. Um, so the crowdsourcing thing is like pretty inexpensive. It's probably like the most cost efficient way of creating this content. But I think that there's a pretty good argument to be made for paying like an agency or a freelance individual to do some of this stuff. Your quality will probably be more consistent. The sort of stuff that you're going to have to do is going to be a lot less. And I mean, but I guess it ultimately depends on your time and your budget and sort of where you are in the value chain on that. For me, I'm pretty much not going to do the content editing and stuff like that myself. I have a business to run and stuff. So anyway, it's now it's time to like track your results, right? But remember when I said that you don't need to worry about the long tail keywords? Now is when you do, and the reason is because you're going to see the needle moving on these long tail variations way before you see your core keywords. So you want to track not just those core keywords, but all of their long tail variations. And that's like, I think, super important to get an idea of what you need to improve about the content. Because when you do get traction and you see things start to move, well, let me be clear. You want to look at your entire portfolio, right? Not just each individual one. You want to look at everything that you've done and prioritize the stuff that shows the most promise. And so I guess if you have one thing, you post it, and then you can improve that one thing. But if you've got a bunch of things, you want to take like your top 10% of content, and then you want to double down on that. And the most obvious thing to do is to add more depth to your content. Just go through it and find areas where you can add more detail, answer more questions, sort of just add new sections. Those keywords that you're that you're ranking on in the long tail can help inform like the areas that you either have gaps or whatever, right? But I mean, ultimately the key is just to like read it. And sometimes this is when it makes sense to combine some of your other pieces of content. If you have some of those zeros where you think it's good content, you can or maybe they're not zeros, but you just want to like make this one area better. Think about like combining your pieces of content, adding them and making them into a bigger piece. You can add some rich content. Google really likes videos inside the articles. So you have an article and the article's doing well. Don't just add more written content necessarily. Add a video to it. Add a video to each section potentially. Those are the types of things that we're seeing that are those sort of mixed media content, I guess, is the type of stuff that Google really likes these days. You want like maximize the amount of time that somebody's going to spend. You want to take them all the way through the process on that particular topic. You can add some infographics. Another thing you can do is add some outside complementary content, like with like bidirectional linking. So for example, you can do like an interview about the same topic with like industry experts, or it doesn't necessarily have to be industry experts. It could be with like customers or whatever, right? It's an interview. It's just a type of thing. You could do an ebook where you link to the ebook and the ebook references it. Obviously, if you're linking to your ebook, you could add like a list of ebooks to, that's something that you can you say like, you're on this topic about single mother grants, right? Well, here's an ebook that you're going to link to about single mother grants. It doesn't necessarily even have to be your content. It could be. You could do like B2B stuff. You could do like white papers. Everybody's got a podcast these days. You could do something where you are linking to your own podcast. You can outlink to other people's podcasts. Ideally, if you can get bi-directional stuff, then that's going to win. And then, depending on the type of content, it might make sense to amplify it. You're obviously not obviously, but you don't necessarily want to do that with every piece of content. Obviously, sharing your stuff on social media is always going to make sense. Well, is probably going to make sense, but paying to promote it, paying to like promote your like thought leadership-ish stuff, to kind of get it into the hands of the influencers that you ultimately want to provide you links, is a good way to get the ball rolling, sort of on building authority for your overall site, right? So if you've got timely content, paid promotion is also possibly a good strategy. You might want to put that stuff in front of journalists and bloggers that are looking to, tap into, timely, maybe newsjacked. Everybody's on the same page on these sort of news things, right? So you want to basically make sure that everybody's on the lookout, right? They're always looking for, something to link to, like that when we did that Game of Thrones thing that we did. Obviously, everybody was trying to write some articles about Game of Thrones or produce some content about Game of Thrones. So we had like a unique piece of content so other people could link to it. And so we wanted to put it in front of journalists so that they could do that. And it worked. Ultimately, you'd want to have retargeting set up so that you can promote your converting content to the people that ultimately visit based on this traffic content. I don't have like, enough time or enough slides, honestly, to go real deep into like on content amplification, but I just wanted to touch on it on a high level. It's definitely part of the double down approach, and often you can create a really targeted custom audience in Twitter or Facebook that costs almost nothing to put your content into their feed. So, that's the process. And I'm just throwing up this slide one more time to remind you that the real value happens after you create the content. It's in the improvement and the augmentations, cycle. Every place that you move up gets you about 50% more traffic on page one, and 20% on anything that's not page one. That's what I've got. I'm complete. And so I'll now open it to any questions that you guys have. And I'll actually pop open the questions as well.
Nice. While you're taking a look, I had a question. You kind of touched on it here at the end, and I was just curious as far as thinking about your sales funnel or the customer journey. So they don't really know you yet. They get to your site. That might have a certain type of content. And then you
Absolutely.
mentioned remarketing might take a different angle, or maybe is a little bit more salesy, conversion type oriented content. Is that something you think through and kind of map out that funnel?
Yeah, as a general rule, right, you want to, like the traffic content, you're always going to want to be at least adding those people to a retargeting list. And if you're capturing leads in that, that's something that you're going to want to do. And ultimately, then you want to retarget them. I would say, like, you're looking at, like as a general funnel, you're looking at traffic, authority, and conversion as kind of like steps of the funnel. Top of the funnel is traffic, middle of the funnel is authority. Maybe middle of the funnel is authority. Just as a general, if we're looking at those three buckets, but of course, again, it's there's the customer journey aspect of all this stuff as well.
Yeah, I think that answered a bunch of questions related to. See if I can find them. Somebody had a question if this was content that was on a product page, and then there's some questions about or some confusion around pages versus posts on a website. So I don't know if you want to
Pages
touch on
versus
that, Mike.
posts. Let me see. I'm trying to find where we're talking about. Can you just ask the question as a I don't see it. I need to like move this
Yeah.
questions thing around on my screen so that it actually works. There we go. Maybe. There we go.
Let me see if I can find that.
Somebody asked, how do we actually find competitors in SpyFu? So you can go to SpyFu right now for free. You type in type in a website, and like the first thing that you'll see, we show you a bunch of stats about that website, and the second thing that we show you is like their competitors. You can see like their organic competitors and their paid competitors. It's actually one of my favorite uses of the tool. Like I always use it all the time because it works really well.
Okay, I found this question here. It said maybe you can go back to the page. Is a page the same value as a post from a content perspective? Seems like it is since it is all crawled. Love to hear your take. So I think it's just some confusion around, when we talk about content, does it need to be, if you're using a CMS like WordPress, does it need to be a post or a page, or does it matter?
Yeah, I think that's like referring to potentially like a differentiation that like WordPress makes. And I don't know that like Google makes a differentiation between what a post and a page is. Although that said, I'm not like an expert on WordPress. Are you familiar with what they're talking about there, like a post versus a page?
That was my interpretation as well. Paul, there's no real difference. You're just really using WordPress terminology or CMS terminology, and that at the end of the day, it's a page, it's a web page on a website.
Yeah, it's a
So both,
URL and it's got content on it. I mean,
yeah.
unless yeah, it's gonna be treated the same. So I don't think it makes any difference which one you use or anything like that. Oh, you know what? Actually, I have this giant, like this giant post-it note on here. I'm gonna post this in the chat. We did create a see if I can post it in the chat. It's gonna go to everyone. It's a promo code for 20% off of all the monthly plans for SpyFu. So this is going to be SpyFu, HTTPS spyfu.me/webinar 20. So hopefully you guys can see that, and maybe somebody can click on it and validate for me that that actually works. If it doesn't, or if you have any questions, obviously you can hop on live chat, like if you want to like get the deal and somehow it's not working for you, just hop on there and tell Danielle or Kim that you heard Mike talking on a webinar and so on and so forth. Everyone here is oh, cool. So everyone says it's good, it works, awesome. That's really good to hear. Someone here just said, let's see, Michael just said, I'm confused about the hub and spoke concept regarding spokes, 80 articles. Are you using a particular keyword, or is it directly related to the articles of the competitors? That's the spokes are topics that are related to your core keyword. So remember, let's see if I can still do this. If I go like way back where we were looking at kind of like, I had like an example of a core keyword. I think it was like marketing strategy or something, but we had a few different topics that derived. So like marketing strategies for nonprofit organizations, marketing strategy for small business. Each of those spokes could be a topic answering some questions related to any of these sort of variants inside this overall topic, which would be like marketing strategy, right? These are just feeding in, and they're just feeding into the main topic, which would be marketing strategy, or you might eventually end up like bringing those spokes into the hub. Remember, so that's how that works. Will we get copies of these slides today? I can do that. What I will probably do is make a Google Slides version of it, and we can send these out. I'm sure that I think a few things get lost, like my little drawings on them, but I think it's kind of clunky to send around like a PowerPoint thing, or we could do a PDF and share it, something like that.
Yeah, if you can PDF it, that's probably the easiest. And then we'll
Yeah,
be sending the
PDF.
replay tomorrow.
Yeah, that sounds great. We'll do that.
Okay,
In
great.
SpyFu, what are sales leads and domain contacts? So we have this, when we do our backlinks crawl, we collect all of the contact info for, and the purpose is that when you want to do like backlink outreach and such, for every for every backlink we have, who do you need to contact to get the link from the person, and then another way that we like leverage that same data is we say for a website, here are the people that like work at that company. So if you are in sales and you want to just like do outreach of a different kind, you can just search by domain, and you can filter by like what's their AdWords budget, or how much SEO traffic do they get, or various different like you can do even like do they have a WordPress site, or do they use like Optimizely, whatever. So that's just kind of a way that we leverage that same information that you can get in like the outreach stuff, and deliver it in sort of a search format.
So Mike, I've seen a couple variations of this question. This one's from Sydney. If an article is 2,000 words long, will visitors actually stay to interact with it? I think there's some skepticism that people will actually read these mega or super articles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, ultimately, what you want to pay attention to are engagement metrics to determine whether or not that's happening. You could certainly like see how many people are scrolling. That's the type of thing that Google pays attention to. You want to increase the increase the time on page. You want to increase what they call the dwell time, and so that's a key thing.
Yeah, and also
It
if you do post it as a blog and you allow comments, that's another measurement. You might one in particular that we published just had a ton of comments on it, so obviously people were reading it and then commenting afterwards. So people do read them. The one that I'm thinking of was
mhm.
I think 3 or 4,000 words long. As long as it's really good information that is tailored to your audience and they want it, they'll read it.
Yeah, and I mean, ultimately, it's how engaging is the content. How well. I don't know how many words a day I read. It's probably 30,000 words. I if I had to estimate. Um, so so I do. Yeah, I think that people will read a lot of articles. I haven't seen that they don't, but it's a journalistic approach, right? You want to put you don't want to bury the lead, so you want to structure the content in a way that basically, you know, you're not writing an essay. You're writing something that's where the most important stuff is near the top, and you work your way down. I think in all content on the internet, um, everything that happens above the fold is the most important stuff. Your headline is like more like you should write 10 versions of your headline. Um, your title, those are super important things. Your meta description, obviously, you should actually spend some time on. These are things that are generally the case. Actually, if you want to know whether or not your headline is going to work, one way to do it is to buy a little bit of uh, test the same headline on your Twitter in a Twitter promotion, right? So you just buy some ads and see what your click-through rate is on the exact same headline that you're planning on using, and split test it. It's a super fast. Like Twitter's Twitter's ad platform, like most ad platforms like Google's or Facebook's or whatever, they like ramp up. It takes a while to get the impressions that you're going to get over time. It's one of those hidden things, it may take like a month for your campaign to be running at scale. Twitter doesn't operate that way. If you tell Twitter that you're willing to spend like, $100, you can spend $100 in like 2 minutes. Like it happens instantly. So if you value time a lot and you want to find your best um, a really good title, you can do it that way. It's a quick hack. Um, are there any tutorials on how to start using SpyFu? Absolutely. There's, you can go to help.spyfu.com. That's kind of where we keep all of that like learning content. We also have spyfu.com/blog, and so these are where we have all the tutorials. We have, I think, like 200 videos that we've made, and we have webinars. There's just an absolute crazy amount of crazy amount of content that we have. Somebody says they don't see the link. It's in chat. It's not in questions. Um, let's see. Somebody wanted to revisit the idea of This is Eric. Wanted to revisit the idea of finding your core keywords. Our divine edict keyword would be Seattle remodeler, but I don't feel that it lends itself particularly well to blog posts. It seems very bottom of the funnel, not necessarily something someone would be searching for during the research blog post reading phase. That's probably true, right? This may be one of your bottom of the funnel things, and so if it depends on the size of that keyword, you may want to break that down into multiple different types of keywords, and this may be some of your converting content. And you'll want to build like authority stuff around it. Let's see. Um, so sort of related content might be, basically how-tos, or what What are some pitfalls with remodeling? You could potentially talk about finding, I don't know, issues inside the walls of sort of a specific type of house. I'm trying to think of like a style of house that's in Seattle. Um, there's all kinds of different content where you could that you can build authoritative stuff around, and but Seattle remodeler or like find a Seattle remodeler, that type of stuff is definitely maybe where you want to start creating calls to action. What do you think there, Phil?
Yeah, I agree. I think you're gonna have to do a little more keyword research, like Mike was suggesting, um, and see what kind of more more research intent type keywords there are, and then build your content. Like, and think about what put yourself in the prospect's shoes, and what would they be searching for before they're ready to pull the trigger and get it, someone to do the remodeling. So they might be, Mike mentioned, how to's, mistakes to avoid, um, and then even something as simple as like how to choose a remodeling company could be something they might be searching. And now you're getting closer to the bottom of the funnel search, like Seattle remodeler.
Yep. So someone was asking whether or not they should spend $100 testing one headline. Um, I'm not saying that you should spend $100 testing one headline necessarily. Actually, I will spend $100 testing one headline because I value my time a lot and I want to produce like a good piece. But I also just really like to get lots of results. And I don't know, I'm sort of testing a headline at the same time that I'm testing ad copy. You definitely don't have to spend anywhere near that. You could probably spend about I think you would get statistically significant results in about $15 or $10. Um, you know, if you run it against a few of your variations. But I think that part of it is that you end up with lessons that you can apply to all of your stuff. So I think it's a useful thing to do regardless of whether or not $100 seems crazy to spend on a headline. What else do we have?
Another question here. Michael asked, did you say that writing the 20 hub articles myself is ideal?
Well, yeah, I'd say that that's ideal. I think that, but it may be daunting. Write one and then write another and then another. Obviously, it's just a matter of eating an elephant a bite at a time. I really want to make it clear that you can do this a bunch of different ways, and you can do as much of it as you want to do, and you should do the stuff that you do in a way that's satisfying and that creates like really good content. Yeah, really great content. You basically want to do a good job, right? Not necessarily churn through it yourself. I think that there's a possibility for burnout there, and you want to leverage what you can.
Oh, one thing I just realized that we didn't touch on this, but if you're doing an email newsletter, I highly recommend making this part of your strategy. So you could repurpose the article, publish it on your site, and then also send it as the content in your email newsletter. So kill two birds with one stone there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can definitely reuse content. And obviously, you can do things where you basically take that same content and yeah, make it into a webinar, or take a webinar and make it into make it into an article, or make it, so you're kind of doing a bunch of different things. I love this question. I think it's kind of funny, and also I'll throw it to you. Hey, do you know of any? This is from Ellen. Do you know of any AI software to help you write really great content? How about that, Phil?
Oh man, that reminds me of back in the day with the spinning software. I don't know if you
hmm
ever
Yeah, I
played around
mean,
with that stuff.
some of that
I,
stuff
I would
does
I would
happen, and definitely not
steer
really
away
great.
from any. Yeah, I would steer away from any tools Anytime you hear the word spinning, I would run away. And anytime you're trying to create content with software, I'd be pretty skeptical of that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
Any advice on finding less expensive but more relevant keywords? Less expensive, are we talking about, and we must be talking about paid stuff there. I absolutely do have all kinds of advice for that, but it's a bit, like I've produced content and tools about that for, basically my entire career. So I would just point you in the direction of going to SpyFu and looking at a bunch of our content because it's a pretty deep topic there. Let's see. I am looking for I mean, I know that there's probably a bunch of questions near the top of this stuff that we didn't get to, and I kind of feel feel bad, but we're also 20 minutes over time. We're gonna let's see what else we can get to here. Which column length with this written content? Do you see anything else that we haven't touched on? I haven't been able to read all of them, obviously. I mean, you guys, I love this audience. It's such a great, like, engaged audience. We have like maybe, I feel like this is like, God, this is just a crazy amount of questions in here, and I really want to get to as many as we can.
I think
Um,
this is probably a good one to end on. I think I've seen this a couple times. So it's basically this concept of repurposing existing content. I think a couple people said variations of this where they've got content on their blog, or maybe it's a client that has a lot of content, and it's not that great, and basically ideas on how to repurpose content or just revamp existing content.
so I guess the main question there, I would say, is first of all, how is it doing? Does it have traction or is it just content? And if it's just content and it doesn't rank, then you might just, ditch it, right? Basically, if it's not getting anything, you could ditch it. And if it's not getting anything and it kind of sucks, ditch it. But it's not necessarily the only thing that matters is traffic. Of course, you have to look at like what are its inbound links, because it might be one of those authoritative pieces of content that's even if you look at it and it kind of sucks, people are linking to it, then you definitely want to try to maybe improve it. Sometimes starting from scratch, starting over is a good idea, but also you could just sort of combine things. But if you combine a bunch of crap together, it doesn't necessarily make it good, you know?
Yeah, I'd say that the most critical point is to take a look at what's going on now. Is it getting traffic? People, is that an entry point to the site? And then also, are people navigating to it? It might be kind of a step in the sales funnel. And people are, it's helping to convert people. So just be careful before you delete anything. And then I wouldn't just delete anything. You probably would want to set up some redirects.
Mm-hmm.
That's true also if you combine some content, you do need to think through how to 301 redirect the old URLs to the new URLs.
Oh yeah, for sure. It redirects and canonicalization and all kinds of things. Like, for example, if you had like like this is a pretty common thing where you have like in like SEO, there's like a 2017 SEO guide, 2016 SEO guide, 2018 SEO guide, and of course we'll have 2020 SEO guides coming up. You don't necessarily destroy all that old content. You kind of just basically link the old content. You basically create a canonical to the new content, right? It's kind of the rule of thumb there from a technical side. Or you can, that's the right way to do it, most likely. But you could also 301 it, or you could delete the old stuff. But 301, you got to 301 it. What else did we have? I think I saw somebody ask if they showed up late. Is there going to be a video of this? And absolutely, we're going to send out a video. A recording of this is definitely part of the package. It's going to happen. You send that
Yeah,
out
we
via
typically
email, is
get
that
that
right?
out. Yeah, we typically send that out tomorrow before noon Eastern time. You
Mm-hmm.
should see an email.
Anybody that registered, that's who it's going to go out to. We'll get it out to you. All right. So I
And
guess, yep.
I was just going to ask, in that email, do you want me to include that link for the discount, or is that
Yeah,
just for
absolutely.
attendees?
Yeah. Sometimes I put those in the slides, and sometimes I forget to put them in the slides. Um, but I think that the chat is actually quite as it may be more useful, right? Like because you can click on it. You
Yeah.
can't click on my slides.
All right. Well, thanks again, Mike. This was great content. Took a lot of good notes here.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you inviting me, and it's always good to be back. I love you. I love the audience.
Yeah, definitely great audience. Thanks for all those questions. And as we just said, we'll be shooting an email in the next 24 hours here, so you'll have the replay and the slides.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Phil.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care.